Model upon your Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. The blessing of the Sabbath. Barakatha Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shah, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Hashabath, Bashalawam, Towada, Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah, that gives to us the Sabbath and peace. Thank you, so be it. Faha'ayim Ma'ad Asherayim Akkad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Ayanyam Ya O Haharyam Ma'ayan Yabawa'a Isaiah Yabawa'a Mayahawa Shaisha Shamayim Warataza La'a Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yala'a Yanawam Shashamaka Hana La'a Yanawam Wala'a Yayashan Shashumar Yasharala Yahweh Shamarya Yahweh Tazalia Ayam Ya Yam Yam Ya Yawamum Hashamash La'a Hakaya Wayarat La'a Baliyala Yahweh Yashamaria Mako Ra Yashamar Napasha Yahweh Yashamar Hawalakia Wabawaya Ma'aitha Wa I Willam Basham Yahawashai Thowada Aman.
Psalms 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shema Yasharella, hear, O Israel. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Akkad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Akkad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Akkad.
Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abi Yanawa, Shabbat Shemayim, Kodash, Haya, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakwatha, Thabaa, Batazawanka, Haya, Aisha, Ba'arataza, Ka, Bashamayim, Natalanawa, Lakam, Yowam, Za, Wasalakwanawa, Kababwathnawa, Kasalaknawa, Kababwathanawa, Wala'a, Habiyanawa, O, Messiah one, Abo, Hawashinawa, Marai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwa, Waha'ala, Watha Pa'arath, La'aiwalam, Aman.
Matthew 6:9. After this manner, therefore, pray. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'ai Shara Matazawaf, the Ten Commandments. La'ah,
La'ah,
Yahaya,
Yahaya,
Lakah,
Lakah,
Alahayim,
Alahayim,
Akarium,
Akari,
Alpanya,
Alpanya,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Thaisha,
Aisha,
Lakah,
Lakah,
Paso,
Pasah,
Wala'ah,
Wala'ah,
Thaibadum,
Waridam,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Thalakwaka,
Alakwaka,
Shamwa,
Shamwa,
Yahweh,
Yahweh,
Alahayaka,
Alaika,
Lashua,
Ashua,
Zakar,
Zakar,
Ath,
At,
Hayawam,
Hayawam,
Hashabath,
Ashabat,
Lakodashwa,
Rakodashwa,
Kabad,
Kabad,
Abiaka,
Abaka,
Wa'amaka,
Wa'amaka,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Tharatazak,
Ratizak,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Thana'ah,
Tana'ah,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Thaganab,
Taganab,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Tha'ina,
Aina,
Shakur,
Shakur,
La'ah,
La'ah,
Thakamad,
Takamad,
Ko,
Kad,
Asherah,
Ashura,
Lara'ayaka,
Zoraika,
Aman.
Aman. Exodus 22. I am the Lord thy God, which I brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Aman. Shabbat, be seated. Barakatha Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Par Yahagabin, Thawada Aman, La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ath, Yasha Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. I model upon you, all Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. The opening prayers. Barakatha Yahweh, Hagadol, Rakawam, Abiyah, Wanara'a, Aliyawan, Malat, Shom, Shamayim, Wa'arataza, Wako, Dabaryam, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiyat, Mayahawa, Adawanawa, Ahabnawa, Hapalam, Yawaitiza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahweh, Barataza 1, Imka, Yasha'ala, Izarnawa, Bana, Wasa, Yasha'ala, O, Nanawa, Yum Yun, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Babakusha, Shalat, Mayaka'ala, Wahataza Wadat, Alahayim, La, Maganawa, Rapanawa, Washamar, Alnawa, Ba'ikul,
Baikor,
Shalat,
Shalat,
Haroka,
Baroka,
Shal,
Shah,
Yahweh Shai,
Yahushua,
Lanawa,
Lanawa,
Lalamadnawa, Rabim, Kakama,
Kakama,
Tabawana,
Tabawana,
Wada'ith,
Wada'ai,
Shal,
Shah,
Dabarka,
Tabarka,
Bahasham,
Bahasham,
Yahweh Shai,
Yahushua,
Thawada,
Tuwada,
Thamyad,
Tamyad,
Wa'iwalam,
Waiwalam,
Aman.
Aman.
English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth, and all things living. And also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably, your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel. Most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever. So be it. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh,
Barakatah Yahweh,
Bahashem Yahweh Shai,
Bahasham Yahushua,
Asherah,
Asherah,
Nathalanawa,
Nathalanawa,
Hathawara.
Hatawara.
Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh,
Barakatah Yahweh,
Bahashem Yahweh Shai,
Bahasham Yahushua,
Asherah,
Asherah,
Nathalanawa,
Nathalanawa,
O War,
Awar,
Lara Awa.
Awar.
Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh,
Barakatah Yahweh,
Bahashem Yahweh Shai,
Bahasham Yahushua,
Asherah,
Asherah,
Nathalanawa,
Nathalanawa,
Koran,
Koran,
Ha'ayol,
Ha'ayah,
La Korah,
Korah,
Ha'ain.
Ha'ain.
Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Barakatah Yahweh,
Barakatah Yahweh,
Bahashem Yahweh Shai,
Bahasham Yahushua,
Asherah,
Asherah,
Nathalanawa,
Nathalanawa,
Hashaman,
Hashaman,
Zayath,
Zayah,
Lamashach,
Lamashah,
Yasha'ala.
Yasha'al.
Shabbat. Be seated. All right. Shalom. Shalom. Peace and blessings to the brothers and sisters throughout the nation of Israel, throughout the four corners. Again, peace, which is shalom in the Hebrew, Ashar Shabbat, which is happy Sabbath in the Hebrew. Today is the seventh day of the week, the day of rest, where we come before the Most High to give honor, praise, glory, and worship to the Most High, Yahweh Shai, or the Most High, in the name of Jesus Christ in the Hebrew. So this is the day that they said in the church that the Lord has made for us to now re-energize, to come back to get invigorated with the Spirit of the Most High. Every Sabbath, every week, this should be that same thing. When we come together, we participate in the Sabbath services. You do your own prayers outside of the Sabbath service. You do your good works, whether you be teaching or you're ministering or you're just doing studying and things at home. This is the time where we now separate ourselves from the rest of the days of the week to come and stand before the Most High on Yahweh Shai, as well as do good works for our brothers and sisters. So this is Hayah Shirala Kanas for those who have just joined in, first or second time. Hayah Shirala Kanas in the Hebrew is a congregation of Israel. Sometimes you'll hear us quote or say certain things in the Hebrew because that is the first language on the planet Earth. That is the language of our ancient ancestors. That is the language that was spoken when we read throughout the Old Testament, the hidden books known as the Apocrypha, and the New Testament. Our forefathers spoke in Hebrew, so sometimes we try to use and get back into our culture and speak Hebrew words and slangs and things of that nature. But when we do that, we'll try to edify for those who may not be astute in what these words are. So you'll hear words like kun, which means yes, or we agree. You'll hear la'ah, which means no, or we disagree. You'll hear Yahweh, which is the Most High's name in Hebrew. Most people like to use the word Jehovah because that's an English term, but in the Hebrew, it is Yahweh. Same thing for Yahweh Shai, which is Jesus, which means he saves, right? So these names and these words you'll hear frequently being mentioned. You'll hear Shalom, which I edified earlier, which means peace and other things. So if there are certain words that I may use, I'll try to edify and bring those out for those who may be ignorant or not aware of what those words mean. So again, this is the congregation of Israel, or Hayah Shirala Kanas, where we teach the laws, statutes, and commandments found throughout the whole Bible, all 80 books, right? Not just the 66 books, which makes the Old and the New Testament, but the Old, New, and the Apocrypha. You find the ceremonial laws, the dietary laws, the moral and civil laws. You'll find the history about our ancient ancestors, the history of the earth, how it was created all the way back from Genesis 1:1. You'll find the history of the nations, right? How the nations evolved and whence they came from their forefathers, and bits of history found in the Bible related to them as well. And one of the most important things that the Most High put into the Bible that separates it from all other sources is the gift of prophecy, to prophesy about events that have not yet come to pass, but to now have the men of the Lord and the women of the Lord prophesy about these things, and the Lord's words stand true and they come to fruition. So that's what we're living in right now. We're living in the last days where a lot of these prophecies are now coming to pass, and it's making more us sure that we now have to come before the Lord and repent and come and do the will of the Lord, which is his commandments and his statutes and his judgments. Okay, so this is one of the main priorities that we have here. Outside of just gathering on the seventh day, we hold classes on Tuesdays and Friday nights, 7 to 10. Most High's will, where we go through a lot of different lessons. We try to answer all questions, because this is one of the main jobs that Yahweh Shai left on his apostles, was to feed the flock. Right? Feed the sheep of the slaughter, meaning to feed them with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding in their minds in these last days, to help them navigate and discern good from evil, so that they can be found worthy when Yahweh Shai or the Savior comes back. All right. So this is the time when we can come and break bread spiritually, and then go into some history, and then as well fellowship together and make our pathway sure as we go on from day to day. All right, so I am Kahan Samak, or Priest Samak in the Hebrew, and I will be presiding over today's Sabbath service lesson. Today we're going to be in the Apocrypha, right? We're going to be in the Apocrypha. We're going to be in the book of Maccabees, continuing on with the storyline. Today is going to be somewhat of a rehashing of what we just went through about 4 months ago, towards the end of the year, when we went into the history pertaining to the day of Judas. Right before Purim, we went into the day of Judas and the events that he had to go through in order to save the nation from, at that time, an onslaught of those who was trying to come and take down Israel. So we're going to go into rehash that information. It's good sometimes to go through it again, because it, stays in the mind. Certain things that you probably missed, or you weren't there at the class, or, you were doing certain things, you probably missed that edification. We're going to go through it again today. And then in the 8th chapter, we're going to go through some history pertaining to the Romans and how we made a confederacy or an alliance with them at that time, and why we did that, right? So that's going to be today's 2 chapters. It is a Sabbath day. It's nice. It's supposed to rain, so we're going to try to get through this judiciously but expeditiously as well, just in case if we have time to get out, all right? So with that, I'm going to jump right in. Before I read that, I'm going to go to the book of Job, the 8th chapter. Before we get into 1 Maccabees 7, I'm going to jump to Job chapter 8. Job chapter 8 and verse 8. It says, "For I inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers." Right? So history plays a very important part with understanding how things began to shape to where they are today. How did certain countries or how did certain kingdoms rise up and begin to now take over certain regions, right? What happened prior to? Where were their origins? Where did they come from? How did they get to where they are? So this is what the Lord said, that we should inquire, I pray thee, of the former age. Go all the way back prior to when we came over on cargo slave ships. Go all the way back prior to where the Greeks and the Romans and them came into power. Go all the way back prior to when the Egyptians and the Babylonians came into power. Let's go back to the beginning of things and then search of the former age and see how things came to be. That's how you're going to be able to gain wisdom, right? Because without it, we're going to be left to what narrative they give us. When I say they, meaning those who are in power, those who are the oppressors, to now conquer and take over certain lands and regions, they're going to give us their own narrative that's going to fit them. But the Most High had the complete narrative. He had the complete history that's found here in the Bible. So this is why we have to include the history that's found in the Maccabees. So don't get caught up where you look at the King James Version Bible that's right now, and it only has 66 books, and it doesn't have that history in it. There's gaps there. Because you read in the Old Testament where you read the last portions of the kingdoms of the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians and Medes, so forth and so on. But then you jump to the New Testament and you get right into the Roman Empire. The Bible is a book of history, and it is completed when you read also the history that's found in the book of the Maccabees, because it goes into the Greco-Roman Empire from when it started from Greece into Rome. So this is why we have to read this history, because it was a part of the complete set. Read it again. "For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. For we are but of yesterday, and know nothing, because our days upon earth are a shadow." Without having the history, without having reference materials to understand what happened 100 years ago and 200 years ago, we'd be left to nothing. Right? We won't know who we are. That's why right now today, when we ask our brothers and sisters, what's your nationality, or where do you come from? What's your origin? Most of us don't know, because we realize that we can't trust on the narrative that we've been given from our oppressors, those who brought us over here. So outside of that, we have no knowledge, right? Then you come to understand in the Bible, the Lord said that there is a confederacy of a league of nations that has suppressed our true identity. So where are we going to go to find out who we are? We come right back here to the Most High's record, to the Bible, and search of the truth, right? Come in here and go into the deep chambers to pull out all facets of bits of history along with prophecy to now bring the complete picture. So this is the important part of why we choose to go New Testament, Old Testament, hidden books of the Apocrypha, so we can cover all bases. Right. So anybody out there, when they read and you talk about, well, why do you read this apocrypha? What is it, apocrypha? I never heard of it. And they try to make light and diminish it. But again, like we said, this book is a part of the original 1611. Right. It has the history. It has the same prophecies that have been given to the other prophets found in the other books. It's in here as well. So the Lord gave us this complete set to now fulfill the whole mission and his will, to allow us to get to the last days, or get through these last days. All right, so I'm going to jump into 1 Maccabees chapter 7. So 1 Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 1. Pardon me, I'm still trying to deal with the congestion that I got. So it reads, it says, "In the 150th year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, departed from Rome, and came up with a few men unto a city of the seacoast, and reigned there." Right? So for you historian buffs, those who like to go into history, you can take this first precept out of here where it says the 150th year, meaning the 150th year of the Greco-Roman Empire. That's a specific date. So you can go into world history, ancient world history, and go back to the time period when the Greeks were ruling in the 151st year. This is around the time that we're reading right now. So you can now go and correlate the history to the Bible. If you don't believe that the Bible is on point, because I remember doing a class or a Sabbath service several months ago, I went and brought out the information where a lot of historians went and correlated all the information that they've gathered and then traced it to the Bible and found out that the Bible is 100% on point, right? It's on point with the information that's found in here. So when we're reading about Demetrius and him departing to Rome, you can go in on Google. You may not even have to go into a deep search and reading all of it. You can go into Google and research this, and you'll find out that it's going to tell you about the same thing, but just from other sources. But we have the Most High source here to get the complete information that the Lord wanted us to get. Because this is from the perspective of Israel, from the Jews, how all of these other nations affected us during their time of rulership, right? So now, again, I'm going to read it. It says, in the 150th year, Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, departed from Rome and came up with a few men unto a city of the seacoast and reigned there. So when we started off in Maccabees, the first chapter in the first verse, we went into the origins of the Greek Empire that started over in Macedonia with Philip, right? Philip was Alexander the Great's father. They started the campaign to now go and align certain influences together and begin to now take over certain regions to push their policies. And it started in Macedonia and then it spread, right? Alexander was the one who took the baton from his father Philip, and then under the Seleucid dynasty later on, it would then become the great empire that Greece became as a rulership, as a kingdom. This was prophesied about during the time of Daniel. When you read in the book of Daniel, I believe the 7th or 8th chapter, it talks about Greece's rise to fame and rise to power. It prophesied about Alexander in the Old Testament, and it also mentions him here in the books of the Maccabees. So now later on, here it is, you see a man by the name of Demetrius. He's now coming up to take his position as a ruler or a king during the time of the Greeks. So it says, verse 2, and as he entered into the palace of his ancestors, so it was that his forces had taken Antiochus and Lysias to bring them unto him, right? Now, why is this going on? Let's jump back a few chapters. Go back to chapter... go back to chapter, I want to say it's chapter 2. Right, let's jump back to First Maccabees chapter 3, actually. First Maccabees chapter 3. So I'm going to start from verse 29. First Maccabees 3 and 29. It says, nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed, this he is talking about Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, right? He was the ruler of that time. And when his funds began to diminish where he couldn't pay his military and his arsenal, he began to get a little bit concerned, right? It says that, and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land and taken away the laws which have been of old time. So when the Greeks came into power, they made Israel forget their laws. So now when the laws is now taken out, the Most High brought in plagues into the land. So you'll see that this has become a reoccurring theme when you read throughout the Bible, when the Most High's people were now taken over, taken out of the land, and they brought in other people and they brought in other laws, the Most High began to plague the land. That's what happened during this time. So now not only was the land being plagued, but his money started to run out. It says, verse 30, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, for he had abounded above the kings that were before him. So this king, Antiochus Epiphanes, he was just not a small-time guy. He was a famed person that was throughout their empire. That name Antiochus is a title that went on down to different men. But he was one of the ones that was renowned at that time. However, he's going through a situation now. Verse 31. Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money. So this is a theme that happens with Esau throughout their empires. When they need more resources and money, what do? They go rape, rob, and pillage other countries. So this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to go into Persia and then take tributes and resources from them to come back and pay his military and his arsenals, right? Same thing happened in these times when they go into South America and they go into Africa and they take their resources, right? Under the auspices of the king or in the auspices of Rome or what have you. In today's times is for so-called Babylon. So it says, verse 32, so he left Lysias, a nobleman and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates unto the borders of Egypt, and to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again. So this man Lysias, which was a nobleman, was now given rulership over that region from the Euphrates, right? This is what now Antiochus Epiphanes put upon him, not only to take care of those affairs, but to now raise up his son, because his son would be the prince or successor to him. Now, when you go into the history, Antiochus and them was never supposed to be king because they was not in line to be king. Demetrius was really supposed to be the one that was king, but he was held up hostage. So while he was hostage in Rome, he went and usurped authority and took that throne. So now there's going to be some jockeying for authority of who should have that position. So now as we're reading this in the 7th chapter, when Demetrius now comes from Rome and now he's coming to take his rightful claim to the throne, who's there? This nobleman Lysias, who was left by Antiochus Epiphanes. And he was left to bring up his son, right? I'm going to read on. It says, moreover, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have had done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem. To wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place. So this is what Lysias was supposed to do, right? Now, remember, the Greeks don't really care about Israel. They don't care about our God. They don't care about their laws. They care about their influence and their power. But they're a prideful people and always have been a prideful people. So now when you have Lysias, who's now raising up Antiochus, he's left there in that region. Now here comes the rightful heir, Demetrius, who's coming to take the throne, right? So now let's jump back to 1 Maccabees chapter 7. So 1 Maccabees chapter 7 and 2, it says, and as he entered into the palace of his ancestors, so it was that his forces had taken Antiochus and Lysias to bring them unto him. So when it says that he entered in and his forces took them, that means there was a battle going on. His forces or his army came to fight against Antiochus' son and Lysias because they was left with forces. But they were overcome by Demetrius' forces, and they captured Lysias and they captured Antiochus, right? It says in verse 3, wherefore, when he knew it, he said, let me not see their faces. So his host slew them. Now, when Demetrius was set upon the throne, of his kingdom. So now after they was removed, right, he didn't even want to see their faces, right? Don't even bring them to me, kill them where they stand. And then he went and sat upon the throne. Now is the kingdom of Demetrius now set up during the time of the Seleucid dynasty. So again, like I said, you can go read the history about that. However, we are focusing more aligned to how they interacted with us. What they did to the Persians and everything else, it highlights it here and there. You can go read about that in their own history. But here is the same thing, but it's focusing more on how Israel dealt with the Greeks at that time under Demetrius' rulership. Verse 5, there came unto him all the wicked and ungodly men of Israel, having Alchemists who was desirous to be high priest for their captain. So now when the Greeks came into power, this is not the first time that we understood the influences that the Greeks was trying to push upon us. When you jump back to 1 Maccabees chapter 1, Let's jump back real quick. I'm going to start from verse 10. First Maccabees 1 and 10. It says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So this is the 137th year that we're reading about here. What we just read in First Maccabees 7 is the 151st year. So almost 15 to 20 years later, right? But now we're seeing what happened then. Verse 11, in those days there went out of Israel wicked men, which persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the men were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. So they figured that we're trying to keep our laws under a Greek rulership, and we facing opposition. We can't get loans. We can't do this. We can't do that. They trying to stunt our growth everywhere we go. You know what? Let's just give in, man. Let's go and make an alliance and a confederacy with them, right? Let's now adopt their ways so that our situation could be a little bit more better. That's what they wanted to do. But in doing that, you got to now forget the Most High. You got to take away and turn off his laws and go and do their ordinances, right? It says, verse 14, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief, right? So this was already happening some 15, 20 years prior. So what we're reading about this guy, Alchemist, was something that had already been, right? They had already wanted to go and join forces with the nations of the heathen. Same thing happens today, right? When you want to get ahead, when you want to get advanced, you got to go and join their policies, join their culture, follow their ordinances, right? That's where they get that saying, one hand washes the other, two hand wash the face. Who's their face? Who's their leader? Who's their ruler? Satan, right? Satan is the one that's running this domain here. So now we've seen here that there was wicked men back then, and as we're reading here in First Maccabees 7, there's wicked men again, right? So now let's jump back to First Maccabees chapter 7. And we're going to read verse 5 again. It says, there came unto him all the wicked and ungodly men of Israel, having Alchemists, who was desirous to be high priest for their captain. So now you still got wicked men that's joining, but then there's just one guy, this one Levite, who's wicked along with them, but he wants to be the high priest. He wants to have that prestigious position where he now is the main top priest over all Israel. But he's wicked. He's not following the ordinances of the Most High, right? It says, and they accused the people to the king, saying, Judas and his brethren have slain all thy friends and driven us out of our land, right? So what are they doing? They're slandering the name of Judas. They're slandering the names of the Syrians. They're slandering anyone who was following after the Maccabees, standing up for righteousness, trying to defend the people. And you're right, they did slay some friends, but these are the ones that came against us. We was defending our honor. We're defending our temple. We're defending our name. We're standing up for the laws. So when you do this and they're coming against you, outnumbered, of course you're going to have to engage in a war. Of course some people are going to be killed. But the narrative is now switched to make Judas and those who are following after him look like the ones who are the villains, to look like the evil ones. So they slander in their name, right? It says in verse 8, so like verse 7, it says, now therefore send some man whom thou trustest, and let him go and see what havoc he hath made among us and in the king's land, and let him punish them with all them that aid them. So go send one of your captains out to go find out and search out if these things be true about this man Judas, of what he's doing in our land, what he's doing throughout the king's quarters, and find out if this is true. And if it is, punish him, meaning deal with him, kill him, right? It says in verse 8, then the king chose Bacchides, a friend of the king, who ruled beyond the flood and was a great man in the kingdom and faithful to the king, right? So it says they now found this man Bacchides, who was reputable, right, to the Greeks, and it says he ruled behind the flood. So that's why when you read throughout the history, you'll read about many different kings. You'll read about many monarchs, because you have some people who set up in different regions. That's like when you read in the New Testament, in the books of the Gospels, when you read about King Herod, but he was a tetrarch over in Judea in Jerusalem. So he was king there. He wasn't the king, right? That's when you now step up the ladder. Then you got Pontius Pilate, right? So you have people who had certain areas. Then you had certain people who had rulership over certain regions. Then you had the actual king who presided over the whole realm, right? But you'll have people who sit on the throne in small sections or small caveats here and there who will also be classified as a king. So this man, Bacchides, he ruled beyond the flood, beyond the waters, maybe the Euphrates River. And that's what his domain was. But now he's being called to come and deal with these Israelites, right? It says, verse 9, and him he sent with that wicked alchemist whom he had made high priest, and commanded that he should take vengeance of the children of Israel. And that usually happens, right? You got a traitor who usually always aligns himself with the enemy to come and give them recon and information about how to take down your own people, right? It happened when Israel was brought over here on cargo slave ships, right? You had the northern tribes and the southern tribes did the same thing. Some of them traded against their own people and made alliances with Esau to go and wreak havoc against their own people for opportunity, for favor, for position, right? And when you look at it, a lot of times, most times, they don't respect the individual who does that. They're just using them for an opportunity. Because if you would rat out your own people, over time, what do you think? What am I thinking you're going to do for me? What are you going to do? You know, your mind or your spirit going to change, and then you might flip. So they usually use you for a time or keep you at bay for a certain distance. And then once they get what they want from you, you're done, right? Because why would they want to keep you around? Because you might have a change of heart and then do the same thing to them that you're doing to your own people, right? So this is what now usually happens. This guy, alchemist, he's now being the one that's going to lead Bacchides into the heart of Israel. And when they see him, they're going to say, oh, that's one of us. He's cool. Shouldn't worry about it. And that's what happens, right? So read 9 again. And he sent with that wicked alchemist, whom he had made high priest, and commanded that he should take vengeance of the children of Israel. So they departed and came with a great power into the land of Judea, where they sent messengers to Judas and his brethren with peaceable words deceitfully, right? So they came in, said, you know what? We're going to send a note, offering up the white flag, right? We don't come with harm. We come in peace. Let's just send this kite out and just, send peaceable words and let them know that we want to have a sit down and everything's cool. I'm your brother. Don't worry about it. This guy's a friend of mine. We should be cool, right? It says, verse 11, but they gave no heed to their words, for they saw that they were come with a great power. So now if you are coming peaceable, why do you need all these people, right? What's all this force for, right? That's just on a normal, being observant. If you now coming to, just break bread, you don't need to have a whole force. Now, when we read throughout the books of the Maccabees, we seen that this was a tactic that was reversed, because there was times when they came to make peace with us, they did the opposite. They didn't come with a force to try to show that this was all good. And that's how they allowed us to get our guard down. And then when they took our captains of the host at that time, it happened a couple times, right? But this time they seen right off the surface that, man, they got about 5,000 people here. Like, what's up with this? Why you got all these people coming? They got swords and weapons and all kind of stuff. Nah, something ain't right here. So they said, you know what, man, get that out of here. I don't want to hear all this stuff, right? So they rejected their offer of peace, right? It says, verse 12, then did there assemble unto alchemists and Maccabees a company of scribes to require justice. So now once the letter of peace got rejected, but they knew alchemists was there, you had scribes that said, you know what? We want to go settle the matter. We're going to go and talk to these guys, right? They wanted to be the intermediary between what was going on because they saw that alchemists was there, right? So this is what they're going to go do. So it says, verse 14, for said they, verse 13, now the Assyrians were the first among the children of Israel that sought peace of them. So we read about the Assyrians first back in 1 Maccabees, the 2nd chapter. They were the group who was all about the laws, who was the ones that aligned themselves with Mattathias first. When Mattathias rejected and rebelled against the Greeks and they went up into the mountains, the Assyrians also came with them. Go to 1 Maccabees chapter 2. First Maccabees chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 39. Let's read about these Assyrians. First Maccabees 2 and 39, it says, now when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore. And one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. So, because what happened was they was coming to fight against them on the Sabbath day. And they looked at the Sabbath day as a day of rest. And they said that we're not going to go and fight a war on the Sabbath day. And that decision cost them their lives because they came and they slaughtered the Jews at that time. So Mattathias said, and the men was like, well, we can't continue to do that. Because if we do, they're going to come root us out of the earth. They're just going to wait until the Sabbath day to come fight against us. So it says here in verse 41, at that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him. Neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also, all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So these Assyrians, who as Israelites, these were Jews, but they had the title of the Assyrians, right? They were mighty men. These were not just some regular guys who was farmers or whatever. No, these was mighty men in spirit and action and in deed that joined themselves to Mattathias. So this is where we now understand that, outside of just the priests, because when we read about the Maccabees, these men were from Levi, right? We can't look at the Levites or the priests or the deacons or the bishops as just like what you see in the churches. They're these now docile men that just go up there and they got the Bible. No, the Levites were men of war. Mattathias was a man of war. Judas was a man of war. Simon was a man of war. Jonathan was a man of war, right? And then you had the Assyrians that joined themselves to them, all right? So now when you go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 7, the Assyrians are the ones who are mighty men that says, you know what? We're going to go and let's see if we can see what's going on here. Because we see one of these guys is us. One of these guys is a priest. Let's go talk, right? So I'm going to read verse 13 again. Back in 1 Maccabees 7:13. Now the Assyrians were the first among the children of Israel that sought peace of them. For said they, one that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come with this army, and he will do us no wrong. Why? Because you trust your brother. It's like this guy's he's just not a Levite, but he's one of the seed of Aaron. But they don't realize that this alchemist is wicked as hell. He's a slander and a cancer to the nation. They just going off of surface, right? So what they did not do, go to the book of St. John. St. John chapter 7, I believe. St. John chapter 7 and 24. Y'all can if you can read that Bible Kushah.
John 7:24. Judge not according to their appearance, but judge righteous judgment.
Right. So the Lord said to make sure that we don't judge just off of appearance. Just because he's an Israelite, don't think that, oh, he's for us or he's a righteous individual or brother. No, we just can't go off the appearance. It says judge righteous judgment. Read 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1.
First John 4 and 1. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirit whether they are of God.
Hold on. So it says, beloved, believe not every spirit. You can't trust everybody. Just because they're Israelite or just because they got on fringes, you can't trust everybody. It says, but try the spirits, whether they are of God. When it says try the spirits, meaning you got to question. You got to look at this person's actions. You got to find out what type of reputation he has. Is he a person that go out there and be cussing everybody out, calling them bitches and whores and this, that, and the third? You got to say, well, hold on. I don't know about this brother. He's a brother, but is he in the spirit, right? So it says, try the spirits, whether they are of God. Why? Read.
Because many false prophets are gone out into the word.
Right. It says because many false prophets within the nation of Israel have gone out into the world or are part of the body. So just as you have righteous spirits, those who have been sent by the Most High, the Lord has allowed Satan to go out and send his minions that's within the nation of Israel following his spirit to teach some other doctrine or follow some other spirit. So we got to be careful. We got to try the spirits, whether they are of the Most High God. So now here it is, the Assyrians, they now judging on the appearance. Oh, look, this alchemist, he ain't going to do us no wrong. He's with the enemy. He ain't going to do us no wrong. Nah, they should have now taken the same advice. But sometimes when we learn from our past experiences, it now helps us out in our current situations. That's the beauty of reading the testimonies found throughout the Bible, right? Go to Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. Yeah, come on.
Isaiah chapter 8 verse 20. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them.
Right. So the Lord says to the laws, statutes, commandments found throughout the Bible and the testimonies, right? So the testimonies are important. Sure, we're supposed to keep the will of the Most High, which is found in the Bible, which is his commandments, his laws. But we also have to go and deal with the testimony. What we're reading about right now is like a testimony of what happened during the times of the Maccabees. What is about to happen to these Assyrians who are about to go and try to make an alliance with a wicked man who's trying to be high priest within Israel, right? So now once we read the storyline, we will now learn from their mistakes, or we'll learn from their good judgment, right? That's what the purpose of the Most High putting the testimonies in it. And if you don't deal with the laws and the testimonies, you have not been enlightened. Because now when you see the effects of what happens when you follow the instructions of the Most High or you don't follow them and you don't read the consequences or you don't read the rewards, then you're missing out on a whole lot of information, right? So that's why we have to go through these history. So now let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 7. And verse 14 again. So 1 Maccabees 7:14, it says, "For said they, one that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come with this army, and he will do us no wrong. So he spake unto them peaceably and sware unto them, saying, we will procure the harm neither of you nor your friends." So we ain't going to bother y'all. We will make sure everybody is good. Everything is safe. Don't worry about it, right? Verse 16, "Whereupon they believed him," these Assyrians, mighty men, "howbeit he took of them 80 men and slew them in one day, according to the words which he wrote." Right? Now check this out. Remember, this is a priest, so he knows the law. He knows the different history and things that's found in the scriptures. So I'm gonna read that again. Watch this. "Whereupon they believed him, howbeit he took of them, he being alchemists, the them is the Assyrians, 80, about 60 men, and slew them in one day, according to the words which he wrote. The flesh of thy saints have they cast out, and their blood have they shed round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury, and was none to bury them." Right? So what is he doing? He's quoting scriptures. Right? He's quoting scriptures about what now just transpired with these Assyrians. Go to Psalms chapter 79. This is how wicked this guy is. That's why we got to be careful. Satan knows scriptures too, right? When Yahushua was being tempted of the devil and coming in the wilderness, the devil was quoting scriptures, right? So just because you're a Bible tote and you know verses here and there doesn't mean that you are a righteous individual, right? So Psalm chapter 79 and verse 2. It says, "The dead bodies of thy servants have they given to be meat unto the fowls of the heaven, the flesh of thy saints unto the beasts of the earth. Their blood have they shed like water round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them." Right? So this is what he's referencing, right? He's referencing this same event that happened during the times of the heathen. Now here it is, alchemists is coming with the heathen, and they're doing the same thing, right? They're executing the same thing against these Assyrians who came to sought peace from their brother. So now let's go back. So now rereading verse 17 again. "The flesh of thy saints have they cast out, and their blood have they shed round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them." So now as we read this verse, what we read in Psalms 79 is the precept that they're taken from. However, what you find out and you read, and it's a beauty for us to understand it, sometimes when you read in the New Testament or you read in the Apocrypha and they're quoting the laws or the testimony from the Old Testament, and you're reading it and you say, well, that's not a direct word for word of the verse, but it's the same thing that it's talking about. It's just giving you a better understanding of what that verse was really meaning, right? It happens a lot. Even when Yahushua quoted certain things in the gospel and you go and you read it in the Old Testament, it's not exactly 100% word for word, but it's giving you the understanding, paraphrasing what the intentions of those historical references were and how it played out in prophecy, right? So that's exactly some of the things that you'll see here when you read scriptures and you link the precepts up. Right? You got to be wise and smart on how to now understand the context to correlate it to say, oh, this is what this was talking about, right? Sometimes people get tripped up when it's talking about a light to the Gentiles, right? There's a lot of different verses in the Old Testament when it speaks about that, and then you read it in the New Testament and you get confused and you're like, well, you said a light to the Gentiles is the heathen, but you don't even understand the history of how Israel became Gentiles, and how they were going to have leaders that were going to be a light unto them as well. So that's why you have to be real careful when you're reading precepts and you're lining them together when they don't say the same thing word for word. You got to understand the Most High is trying to expound on the real meaning and intent of those things that was written. All right. So now let's continue on. First Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 18. It says, wherefore the fear and dread of them fell upon all people, who said, there is neither truth nor righteousness in them, for they have broken the covenant or the agreement and oath that they made, because they said, look, no harm is going to come to you. Don't worry about it. Everything is good. But they broke that, right? That's the same type spirit. I think it's in Psalms 55. Psalms chapter 55. Psalms chapter 55 and verse 20, right? So when you look at this, this is a perfect parallel, because when we read these precepts in Psalms 55 and 20, we normally have always usually aligned this with Esau when they've now gone through their campaign and taken over certain countries and continents or people, right? They come with peace, right? But then they now turn around and impute death upon a different nation, right? Come with peace, but then as you are now comfortable, you're sitting down, everything's cool, then all of a sudden they slaughter a people. So this is Psalms chapter 55 and verse 20. It says, he hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. Same thing that we're reading about alchemists being there with the Greeks, right? Because remember, Maccabees and them is now along with alchemists. They're the ones that's coming to now do the agreements of peace with them. But what did they do? They broke that peace agreement and then now went to go and do harm on them. Verse 21, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. So that's what you read about the history with the Native American Indians in the country, the Seminole Indians, right? The conquistadors, the pilgrims, all of them, they came over here with peace, right? But what happened? The scriptures say war was in their heart because they want to conquer, right? They want to have that part of conquering a whole realm, a whole region. And when you go into the history about what happened during the times of Gad and Reuben, you'll see that some of us gave in, right? Some of our northern tribe of that, they gave in, and then there was some that never gave in, right? When you go into the history pertaining to Reuben, there was some that never gave in, and they dwelt down in the Florida Everglades down in that region. They never signed an agreement. They never were willing to go into the different reservations and things that some of the northern tribes went to. But they came with peace. And what happened? I think in the movie Geronimo, in the old school movie Geronimo, they have a part in the movie where he says, why must the white eye have all the land? Like what? Like if you really go and you look at United States, there's a lot of land that's not inhabited. Like nobody's living there. It's just open area, right? You have the top 5% of people that own all of these lands. But now when I'm sometimes flying over, I'm looking, I'm like, dang, it's a whole bunch of land here. Ain't nothing going on over there, right? So now when you think of it, it was like, dang, why couldn't they have dwelt, in this region over here, like how the Lord divided up the lots and say, okay, you have that over there, you have that over there, you have that over there? No, because the Most High had already put the spirit in Esau where he had to conquer everything, right? He had to conquer everything during the times of the Greeks, and he would have to expand on that from the times of the Romans to where it is now. During the times of the Greeks, when they ruled the known world, it was only a certain subset that was over in that region. When the Romans came up and they conquered, and then they fell and they came back, when they came back to where they are today, they had to conquer the whole earth, right? Now, when we say conquer the whole earth, it's not that he's sitting over there in China and he's dictating to their prime minister or leader what's going on. No. When we say he controls the whole earth, he now puts restrictions on who can do what and what, right? That's why when it happened over in Ukraine, everybody said, oh, you see the Russians, they trying to now usurp their authority and take back their land. What did they say? Oh, China's going to try to do the same thing with Taiwan because they want that region. But who's over there preventing them? Esau, right? Esau has that control of that area. They don't want them to get that. So they got military bases and things over there. So they have control over the whole earth. It was nothing that Esau could not have done but to go out and conquer, because the Most High in Christ created them that way. Put that spirit in them to do that. And it was prophesied all the way back from the Babylonian Empire that they were going to do that. Even before the Greeks came into power, the Most High said the Romans will rise up, conquer the Greeks, fall, and then come back under another name and then rule the world, right? It was just put in parable form. It was just put into the manner where everybody couldn't see it. Only the elect of the Most High, only the chosen would be able to see these mysteries. Right, and that's the beauty of the prophecy where Yahushua had spoken about these things, where in the gospel when he says it's going to be wars and then it's going to be rumor of a war, meaning we can hear people talk about what might happen, but it never happened. You can just see that it might develop, but that may never happen. What the Most High said is going to happen is already documented, right? That last world's war will be in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It will be there, and all these major nations will have their influences in there like they had during World War I and World War II, right? All major nations will have their part. They got to choose a side of who they want to go and defend or be a part and ally with, right? And that's where everyone is going to converge. Right now, a lot of people look at China and the Pacific. No, the Lord didn't say that. The Lord said in the Middle East, in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So we've got to make sure when we see certain events transpiring, what is now leading or aiding that to now develop. That's going to be the major concern. But, there's going to be things here and there popping up, little conspiracies, little things over here. But that's not the main one. The main one is what's going to happen within that region in the Middle East. All right, so let's go back. So we at now 1 Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 19. It says, after this, remove Bacchides from Jerusalem. Because remember, we was reading about alchemists and how he went in there to be the traitor to his people. But it was Bacchides who came with this peace agreement. And then we did what? Went and slaughtered the Assyrians. And now they're going to another area. So it says he removed from Jerusalem and pitched his tents in Bezeth, where he sent and took many of the men that had forsaken him, and certain of the people also. And when he had slain them, he cast them into the great pit, right? So it's like the pit when you seen when the old movies of when they talk about the so-called Holocaust, and they had all the dead bodies in the pit. Or I think in New York City, what do they call that area in New York? Dang, I forget the name of it, because during the time of the coronavirus, they was taking bodies and dumping them over there. I forget the name of the place, man. It's like a little island that's supposed to be separate. Why is this escaping me? I remember we talked about it in the class. If anybody that's online that's in New York, Maccabees, Aquan, if y'all remember what that area is where they have unmasked graves, like they just got a whole bunch of dead bodies and stuff that's put there. I don't know. I know somewhere in New York. I can't remember the name of it, but this is what happens when you now go and slaughter a whole bunch of people, right? And there's no one to bury them. They just take them and just dump their bodies into a pit and just cover it up, right? Now you got people who die without honor, because usually you want to have at least a memorial for a certain person. These individuals say, what is it? Hart Island? No. That's not the one. The one that somebody just potted in the field. Potter's Field, the water, brother. Potter's Field. That's the one, right? Potter's Field, when you look it up, that's where they go and they have bodies, different old big pits of graves that they just dump these bodies. And when the virus back in 2020, when it was really kicking off, they was taking bodies and dumping them over there. Remember back then, it was kind of crazy. They were just trucks and stuff was pulling up with bodies, and you're like, well, where are these people gonna go? Because everybody was like, they don't want to be associated, they don't want to come near it, so they were just taking them over to Potter's Field, right? But now here in this area, back then, they was taking these men, killing them, and they was dumping them into the great pit. So they had a great pit back then that was like Potter's Field and these other areas where they was dumping all these bodies. Verse 20, then committed he the country to alchemists and left with him a power to aid him. So Bakaz went to the king, right? So after everything was now situated and they thought that, they had control over the region, right? Bakaz said, oh, I'm about to bounce. I'm about to lead and go back to the king, but I'm going to leave you with the force that you can now take and control the realm under your own authority, right? So now he's got that power, but his whole thing was he wanted to be high priest, right? He still is not high priest, but he has control over the realm. Verse 21, but alchemists contended for the high priesthood, and unto him resorted all such as troubled the people, who, after they had gotten the land of Judah into their power, did much hurt in Israel. So now you had some people who now recognize that this guy was a traitor to his own people, right? So anyone else who came to inflict harm or put certain restrictions upon them, they aligned themselves with alchemists. Some of them would have probably been our own people because we read about them in 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter. And then now you have others who also now are made an alliance with alchemists to do what? And put harm upon us. So again, we have the 151st year of the Greek Empire, where we're now seeing these things transpire of what was going on with Israel at that time. This is a moment in time. This is a snapshot in history, right? It says in verse 23, now when Judas saw all the mischief that alchemists and his company had done among the Israelites, even above the heathen, right? Check that out. This is even above the heathen. Sometimes we worse to ourselves than they are, right? We worse to our own selves than the heathen, because one would think that, listen, we each other's brothers. When we look at what goes on in our communities, right? We all grown up in poverty. We all got the same doggone policies that's imposed upon us, but we see each other as the enemy, right? We go and when the nations come in, we don't do nothing to them, right? When they come through, it's as if they're immune to the same type wickedness that we pose upon each other. And the Lord looks at that and says, dag, man, we became more wicked than the wicked.
It's like Israelites that still in the world doing wicked stuff and scheming and plot to rob their own people before they think to touch anything that belongs to it.
Yep. Exactly. I think you got the verse. You about to read the verse that I was about to. Go ahead.
Jeremiah 5:28.
Yep. I think. Matter of fact, is it? Let me see if we want to. I want to start a little bit further up. Jeremiah 5. Start at 26. Jeremiah 5 and 26. I thought he was right there.
Jeremiah 5:26. For among my people are found wicked men. They lay wait as he that setteth snares. They set a trap. They catch men. As a cage is full of birds, so are their houses full of deceit. Therefore, they are become great and waxen rich.
So now it says, among the Most High's people are found wicked men, and they set and lay traps for their own people. They catch men, right? So that was in their minds, this type of deceit, this type of wickedness above what the heathen is doing to us, right? It says we're like caged birds. That's all, when you look at a cage that's full of birds, it's all flying around, it's confusion up in there, right? The Lord said that's how we are. We're like, what is it, Isaiah 51, I think in 20? It says we're like a bull that's caught in a net out there in the corners, right? We have no sense. We're like animals that's running around there, right? Read on.
Verse 28, they are waxing fat, they shine, Yea, they overpass the deeds of the wicked. They judge not the cause of the fatherless. Yet they prosper, and the right of the needy do they not judge.
Right. So it says they are waxing fat, they shine. Right. Look how the words poetic, how the Most High is even describing how we are even in these last days. It's the same type of lingo that we use. Look at him. He's shining. He just robbed his brother, though. He just stole this from his family, but he's shining. There's prospering. He's waxing fat, right? His pockets is fat, but he's doing everything, not to the nations, but to his own people in order to amass these things. He's not judging the needy or the poor. He's not considering how we are all trapped in this maze. Who put us here? How do we get like this? Right? Who's the one that's taking away our education, taking away our funding to now cause us to go and be enemies to us? He's not judging righteously. He's just looking at what's in front of him and take.
The music industry, the rappers, they shine. I'm shining.
Mm-hmm.
Then they turn around. They don't realize what they're doing. How they teaching you wickedness, teaching them to go astray. You lost the world versus you lost that.
Exactly. Right. I mentioned it. I think it was last week, Friday night class, where I saw the clip of Farrakhan, and he was making light of how rappers and everyone else, the singers, they get up there and they, bitches, whores, this, that, and the third, all kind of wickedness in their music. And then when they go to accept their award, they want to thank their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, right? It's like, look how hypocritical that is, right? Depending on the Jesus that they're serving, right? If they're serving the Caesar Borgia, everything they're doing falls in line with what they're talking about, because that's how they acquired all the different places in the world that they have now, right? By doing the same thing. But the Yahweh Shah Savior that's in the Bible, he does not stand for that. Matter of fact, the Lord is letting us know that this is now something that he's full in rage of. We have wicked men amongst our own people that's causing harm to our own, right? Worse than the heathen, as what it says, became overpast the deeds of the wicked. So this was something that even during Jeremiah's time, then time of the Babylonian captivity, that he saw that was going on then. If it happened back then, we knew it was going to be happening now. We're seeing it even happen during the Greek Empire. So let's go back. First Maccabees chapter 7. So 7:23 again, it says, now when Judah saw all the mischief that Alchemist and his company had done among the Israelites, even above the heathen, he went out into all the coasts of Judea round about and took vengeance of them that had revolted from him, so that they durst no more go forth into the country. And on the other side, when Alchemist saw that Judas and his company had gotten the upper hand and knew that he was not able to abide their force, he went again to the king and said all the worst of them that he could, right? So now Judas, Maccabees, and them coming to clean house, man. They coming to get right the wrong, right? All those men that lined themselves with him, they getting as much of them out of there. Some of them, they had to be killed. That's what you read. They killed some of these men. Now, they just go up to him and say, hey, brother, stop what you're doing, right? You got to stop that. No, these men was wicked as hell, and they had to go fight, and some of them had to be put down. That's just the consequences of their actions. So when Alchemist saw what was going on, and there was nothing he can do because the Most High was backing Judas, he went back to the king to slander him even more. Verse 26. Then the king sent Nicanor, one of his honorable princes, a man that bare deadly hate unto Israel, with commandment to destroy the people. So first it was Bacchus. He left and was now sent to do something else. Now here comes Nicanor, who's now got ultimate hate for the nation of Israel, right? They chose the right guy to come and fight us in opposition, not somebody who's going to, have some kind of love for us. This guy bare deadly hate to us, right? It says, so Nicanor came to Jerusalem with a great force and sent unto Judas and his brethren deceitfully with friendly words, saying, let there be no battle between me and you. I will come with a few men that I may see you in peace. So like we said before, when Bakads and them came, right, they had a whole bunch of men and they was coming with peace. It's like, hold on, why y'all gotta have all these men? So they wasn't listening to their peaceable words. So they came through force and took them down. Now, Nicanor, because he's a man of war, right? He said, look, I'm only going to come with a few men. So I don't want to alarm anybody. I don't want to get, set this off as a thing that I'm coming to fight. I'm coming to just break bread, right? It says, let there be no battle between me and you, and I will come with a few men that I may see you in peace. He came, therefore, to Judas, and they saluted one another peaceably. Howbeit, the enemies were prepared to take away Judas by violence, right? That's why we just read what we read in Psalms 55, right? They came with a covenant of peace, but war was always in their heart to come and take them down. And that's what happened. But that's a tactic that they used. They said, well, they came with a great force before. We ain't going to do that. We're going to make them a little bit more comfortable. We're only going to come with a few men. A few men just says, all right, ain't nothing going on. And they came. When you read it in 2 Maccabees, it was a little bit longer time that they spent with their interaction of peace, right? To the point where Nicanor himself even got out of the spirit as far as for what his mission was, right? And then alchemists had to go back to the king and say, hey, look, this guy taking too long over here. What he doing? He kind of falling in line with this guy, right? And then the king had to send words to Nicanor to get him back on track, right? Let's get that real quick. 2 Maccabees, chapter 14. Second Maccabees, chapter 14 and verse 23. Actually, I'm going to start at 18. 2 Maccabees chapter 14, verse 18. It says, nevertheless, Nicanor, this guy who had bare deadly hate unto Israel, hearing of the manliness of them that were with Judas and the courageousness that they had to fight for their country, durst not try the matter by sword, meaning he didn't want to come initially to fight, right? Wherefore he sent Posidonius and Theodotus and Mattathias to make peace, right? Because now sometimes there's honor in war. There's honor when you're fighting against a certain person. You can respect that this guy is a soldier. I'm about to go try to kill him, but I respect how he moves. I respect how he go and defend his own people. Well, we doing the same thing, but game recognized game, as they say, right? So now here it is. They're coming to sit with Nicanor, and he's not going to try to fight initially by fight or by might. Verse 20, it says, so when they had taken long advisement thereupon, and the captain had made a multitude acquainted therewith, and it appeared that they were all of one mind, they consented to the covenants and appointed a day to meet in together by themselves. And when the day came and stools were set for either of them, Judas placed armed men ready in convenient places, lest some treachery should be suddenly practiced by the enemies. So they made a peaceable covenant, right? Or a peaceable conference. So he was able to go and still take the meeting. However, he wasn't just going to be, let his guard down. He said, you know what? These guys, I don't trust them like that. I'm going to agree to the covenants that we set aside, all the provisions. We're going to meet over here. You're not going to have nobody. We're going to do all of that. However, I'm going to set my guys in wait in these different areas, just in case something kick off, that we be able to defend ourselves, right? It says, verse 23, now Nicanor abode in Jerusalem and did no hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him. And he would not willingly have Judas out of his sight, for he loved the man from his heart, meaning he had respect for him, right? So he was observing his movements, right? Sometimes when you respect somebody or you admire, how they are, you just sit there and watch. You see how they interact with certain people. You trying to take notes. So that's what it meant where he didn't want him out of his sight. He respected him that much, right? It says, he prayed him also to take a wife and to beget children. So he married, was quiet, and took part of this life. Meaning there was a time where everything was cool, right? Sometimes you just can't come in right out the gate and take down the enemy. Sometimes you got to play the game, right? You got to have people who infiltrate. That's what they say Ishmael does a lot with this quote unquote sleeper cells, right? They get people who come in, right? They get a family. They be living there for 5 years, 10 years. And all of a sudden they get the word, hey, it's time to go accomplish the mission. And they're like, yo, where this come from? This guy had kids in the school and everything else. He went and took part of the life, right? That's what Nicanor is trying to set him up for. It says, verse 26, but alchemists, perceiving the love that was betwixt them and considering the covenants that were made, came to Demetrius and told him that Nicanor was not well affected toward the state, for he had ordained Judas, a traitor to his realm, to be the king's successor. So now, alchemists, he don't hold back on the slander, right? So any opportunity that he get, he now slandering Nicanor. Like, look, this guy over here, man, he's setting up Judas to be your successor right now. You got to get on top of this guy because I don't know. So alchemist is always about his business. It's always about his motives, right? Verse 27, then the king, being enraged and provoked with the accusations of the most wicked man, wrote to Nicanor, signifying that he was much displeased with the covenants and commanding him that he should send Maccabees prisoner in all haste to Antioch, right? So as you read on down, this is what now spurs Nicanor to now want to take Judas at that time, right? Can't wait no longer, right? You probably had your own tactic. You taking too long. Let's get the job done, right? So let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 7. So now we're going to reread verse 29. And before we read verse 29, link up Ecclesiasticus chapter 12. Ecclesiasticus chapter 12. Verses 10 and 11. Actually, I'm going to read from, Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha, chapter 12, verses 10 to 12. Chapter 12, verses 10 to 12. It says, never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness, right? So on the surface, it might seem as if he's friendly, he's cordial, everything is fine, everything is cool. That's what happens when you go in society. Be like, well, all Edomites ain't bad. They all ain't wicked. They all this, that, and the third. But the Lord said you can never trust your enemy because there's a time where that moment of, comfort, it rusts. And then what happens? He's going to take you by opportunity because your guard is down, right? So read it again. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. And that also goes for Israel because you got some Israelites who are your enemy as well, right? Even Yahushua said, right? A man's foes shall be they of his own household. Your enemy will now be those that are within the nation and sometimes even in your family. They'll sell you out. Right? Even in the world, we see people sell out their own family members, sell out their own mother. Right? I remember when we was up in Newark, a young brother was in a gang, and in order to get initiated into I couldn't understand. In order to get initiated into the gang, they went and raped his mother. Yes. And he was down with it. He didn't say, oh, no. Yeah, they got the dummy, but when you say to yourself, Dag, in order to join that, you go do that, sell out your mother for the I think it was the Bloods that was up there, right? So your enemy can be they of your own household, right? Not just the nations or not just Esau, right? You could be a foe to yourselves.
Besides that, look at the brother who jumped. Mom was driving the car. He killed the boy. Shot that Asian boy was driving to.
Yeah, I just seen it. Yep. Yeah, now I just saw that in the news this morning. He said that for those who couldn't hear, here in Philly, it was a brother and his mother driving behind a Moabite. I think it was a Moabite, and they were driving slow, too slow for their convenience. And the brother got out and went and shot up the car, killed the dude, right? So they just got him, but his mother was the one driving the car. So now they're going after the mother as a conspirator to the crime, right? Because she was kind of like the getaway driver, I guess they see. She didn't come forth to say, oh no, my son, he went and did this crime. I don't know where he on the run, but I don't want no parts of it. So they're now trying to come after her as well. But the moral of the precept is you got to be careful with those who you tag as being the enemy, right? Heathen or Israel. It says in verse 11, though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as thou hadst wiped a looking glass, and thou shalt know that his rust have not been altogether wiped away, right? So he'll present a facade to you, but if you're clear-minded, if you're alert, you will be able to see that beneath all of that, beneath what he's putting, I can wipe that away and I can see you for who you really are. Verse 12, set him not by thee, lest when he have overthrown thee, he stand up in thy place. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat. And thou at the last remember my words and be pricked therewith. So don't forget, right? Don't forget, this is wisdom. This is guidance. This is not a law, right? This is wisdom. Make sure you watch those who are around you, especially those who are your enemies, right? Because they're setting themselves up for opportunity. So now let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 7. So 1 Maccabees 7:29, it says, he came therefore to Judas, and they saluted one another peaceably. Howbeit the enemies were prepared to take away Judas by violence, which thing after it was known to Judas, to wit, that he came unto him with deceit, he was sore afraid of him and would see his face no more. So when you align 1 Maccabees chapter 7 with 2 Maccabees chapter 14 and the events that we were just reading, there's time and space that happens between what we read in this verse, because he took a wife and had life and did all those different things. And then that's when alchemists came to Demetrius and say, look, Nicanor taking too much time. And then after that, Nicanor began to be churlish to Judas, right? Starting to become very offensive to him. And that's when Judas realized what was going on, that his rust was now starting to shine. He withdrew himself from him, right? That's what we're reading and picking up from right now. So now it says in verse 31, Nicanor also, when he saw that his counsel was discovered, went out to fight against Judas beside Carphasalama. Verse 32, where there was slain of Nicanor's side about 5,000 men, and the rest fled into the city of David. So now after everything was put out there, he now is ready to go fight the war. But engaging in the war, he lost dramatically. He lost 5,000 men right off the rip. And then his guys is fleeing now into the city of David. Verse 33, after this went Nicanor up to Mount Sion, and there came out of the sanctuary certain of the priests and certain of the elders of the people to salute him peaceably and to show him with the burnt offering, to show him the burnt sacrifice that was offered for the king, right? So now you got some individuals that's leaving, fleeing because they was being slaughtered. Nicanor, he didn't follow them to the city of David. He went up to Mount Sion to where Jerusalem was, where the temple was. So then you had certain men that came out because they know that the Greeks are in authority. They know that they are in positions of authority. So when you read throughout the Maccabees, there had already been interactions with the Greeks coming to the temple. There had already been times where some of our people went and took certain relics out of the temple to give to the Greeks. right? Sometimes the Most High stopped them, other times the Most High allowed it. So now here it is, they're trying to now show some face to these heathen by doing a sacrifice for the king so that they would be at peace. This is like a tactic to say, we don't want no harm. We'll do this for you, for the king. But all the while, if you allow us to keep our laws and commandments, everything is going to be cool. So this is what now they coming out to say, yo, we do sacrifice to the king. All is good. Nicanor don't give a damn about that because he's on the run now. Judas is a part of this people. So now he's about to do a lot of swearing and cursing against the temple and the Most High because of what Judas had been doing, right? It says in verse 34, but he mocked them and laughed at them and abused them shamefully and spake proudly and swear in his wrath, saying, unless Judas and his hosts be now delivered into my hands, if ever I come again in safety, I will burn up this house, talking about the temple. And with that, he went out in a great rage. So imagine him standing in front of the priest in the temple, swearing and cursing and doing all this stuff. Yo, if I come back, when I come back, I'm going to destroy this whole place and y'all. And he's saying all kind of things, and then he'd leave and bounce out in a rage with whoever he had at that time. So now, remembering, this is a guy who had deadly hate for Israel. This is a guy who's like a captain of the host for the Greeks. So he's reputable. So the people knew who he was and knew what he was about, that as they say, about that life for real. So now what happens? Fear begins to set in because it's like, Dak, somebody's about to try to come destroy the temple. The heck is going on here? What did we do? Right? Verse 36. Then the priest entered in and stood before the altar and the temple, weeping and saying, thou, O Lord, didst choose this house to be called by thy name and to be a house of prayer and petition for thy people. Right? So this happened during the time going all the way back in the book of Kings. I think 1 Kings chapter 8 to chapter 10, where Solomon dedicated the house of the Lord to the Most High. And then in turn, the Most High accepted that temple and to place his name there, right? And that Israel will be a people unto him and he will put his name upon the people. So this is now what we're seeing as the carryover from Solomon's temple to when Ezra and them came and rededicated or rebuilt and furnished the temple up into the time now where the Greeks are coming into power. So they realized that the Lord said that that place would be his house. That's where he would accept his sacrifices. But this guy's talking about he about to tear the building down. He about to destroy it. But I remember, Most High, when people come against us, how you fight for us. This is going to be the testimony that we read about in Isaiah 8 and 20. Because this just don't happen back then. This happens all the time. When some oppositional force comes against Israel, whether it be an individual man or the nation, the Most High will send the angels to come fight for you, right? The Most High can do that if you believe. You got to have a faith. When you read the gospel, Yahweh couldn't heal a lot of people if they didn't have a faith. They believed in Yahweh. They saw that he was that one. And Yahweh told them, based on your faith, you was healed. So in the same token, based on our faith, we'll be protected and defended.
I got to rumble with this really big stocky Edomite bull, and I felt the angel come down on me. I just felt the angel hit me, and I just kept hitting this bull with right hooks. When he first grabbed me, I felt the strip. I was like, uh-oh. But then I felt the angel. I just kept hitting me with
Spirit of might.
Man, please. Both sides of his face swelled up. He started asking, notice he won't get me again if I come out. And then he was afraid of that.
Right.
Mind you, he was like twice, almost 3 times my size.
Right. Exactly. So the Most High could send an angel, or he could send the spirit on you, like Samson, right? He could put the spirit of might on you in order for you to defend yourself. So this is what now, during this time, Israel, the priest, the men of the Lord, is looking to get comfort and protection from the Most High. So I'm going to read it again, verse 37. Thou, O Lord, didst choose this house to be called by thy name, and to be a house of prayer and petition for thy people. Be avenged of this man and his host, and let them fall by the sword. Remember their blasphemies and suffer them not to continue any longer. Right? So remember, majority of the time, the Lord has testimonies in the scriptures that before we engage in something, we always went to the Father and asked for help, meaning we went and did prayer, right? There's certain things that we have to do in order to get the Most High to protect us, right? Before we go to war, what is one of the things that we got to do before we go to war? We got to blow up the ram's horn, right? That's what we learn about in the memorial blowing the trumpets. When you read Numbers chapter 10, I think in that first chapter 1 to 10, that's a statute to blow up the ram's horn before we engage in any war, right? And then also to go and pray to the Most High before we engage in any war. Those are the prerequisites. So you'll read it even throughout the Maccabees, but before they was about to go fight, they blew up the ram's horn and he sent up a prayer, right? So that the Lord, it's like you asking for help. It's like you about to get in a fight, you in your neighborhood, and then you don't know what's going to go on. You go to your dad, like, Dad, I'm about to go fight. What should I do? Right? Should I go with my left? Should I leave with my right? Like, what should I do? Or should I not fight at all? Is it the time to fight? Because there's times in the Bible where the Lord said, no, you ain't going to go fight. This ain't the time. Let it be. Word? Yeah. You ain't going to fight. And we got to stand down. Right? Sometimes your dad be like, look, nah, don't worry about it. I'll go talk to him. Leave it alone. And there's other times it's like, boy, hit you. All right, let's go. You about to go out. We about to rumble on. Right? So the Father is one that's going to guide the sons to make the right decisions. The Most High is the one that's going to come protect us and tell us what we need to do. So reading on, verse 39. So Nicanor went out of Jerusalem and pitched his tents in Beth Horon, where an host out of Syria met him, right? So he pitched his tent and he had another group of people come and now make an alliance with him coming out of Syria, right? It says, but Judas pitched in Adasa with 3,000 men, and there he prayed, saying, O Lord, when they that were sent from the king of the Assyrians blasphemed, thine angel went out and smote 184,500 of them, right? So again, here it is. What is Judas doing? The priests are sending up their prayer, but now here it is. Judas that's over in Adasa, he's sending up his prayer and remembering how the angel helped our forefathers in the past. So you read about that history in 2 Kings, the 19th chapter, right? 2 Kings, the 19th chapter. And verse 34. 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 34. And it reads, it says, for I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake, right? So this is the Lord saying that he's going to defend the city. It says, and it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 184,500. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses, right? So in the night, the angel went out and was slicing and dicing and killing all these men. 100, what did it say? 184,500. It's a lot of men that got the Most High sent the angel to slaughter. So when the sun rises and the sun comes up and everybody's going out and look, the heck? Everybody dead. Ain't nobody to fight. The Most High went and defended his city. We didn't have to pick up a sword. So now Judas is remembering that sometimes the Most High can do that, right? So he's asking for the angel to come down and defend us against Nicanor and his soldiers. So now let's go back to 1 Maccabees 7. Adasa?
No, he said, for I will defend the city.
David.
David.
Yeah, verse 34. Mm-hmm. So now reading on, 1 Maccabees 7:42, it says, even so destroy thou this host before us this day, that the rest may know that he have spoken blasphemously against the sanctuary, and judge thou him according to his wickedness, right? So he's blaspheming against your holy temple, right? And we want him to be made an example of, so that everybody else can see when anybody come and step up against you, this is what happens, right? Verse 43. So the 13th day of the month Adar, which is the 12th month, the host joined battle. But Nicanor's host was discomforted, and he himself was first slain in the battle, right? So it says Nicanor's host was discomforted. Why? Go to Deuteronomy 2. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 2. And 25. So Deuteronomy 2:25, it says, this day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. So now before the battle even starts, the Most High can go in and change the spirit that's on the enemies, right? Making them feeling what? Discomforted. They don't really want to go out and fight. They don't have that courageousness that they once had before, and they was taking down everybody else. But now they're coming against Judas, and they now seeing who they're fighting against. They're a little bit more timid now. They don't really want to go out and fight. They're not charging. And the Most High now allows the men. He didn't send the angel to go slaughter like he did during the time of Sennacherib, but he discomforted Nicanor and his host, so that Judas and his men were able to go in and do what? Kill them all, right? And who was taken first? Nicanor, right? He was the first one that got taken, right? Not anybody else. He had to be the first one. And then, usually when your captain or your host gets taken out, everybody else is like, oh, man, because he's the one that's guiding you. He's supposed to be your leader. They kill the leader, take the head off, it's done. So let's go back to 1 Maccabees 7. 44 again, it says, 43. So the 13th day of the month Adar, the host joined battle, but Nicanor's host was discomfited, and he himself was first slain in the battle. Now, when Nicanor's host saw that he was slain, they cast away their weapons and fled, right? So their spirit was changed, that they didn't want to go out and fight. They seen Nicanor get killed, first one. They said, you know what? We out. They dropped their sword and hightailed it up out of there, right? Verse 45. Then they pursued after them a day's journey from Adasa unto Gazara, sounding an alarm after them with their trumpets, right? And you can go into the history as far as for a day's journey, a Sabbath journey, just going into the time and space that it takes from you to get to one place to another, because you got, you're taking certain things with you, and then you got to carry it, and then you got to rest. Right? It's not saying that 24 hours it took them to get there. It's going between back then the time and space that it took to travel. Now, it says in verse 46, whereupon they came forth out of all the towns of Judea round about and closed them in, so that they, turning back upon them that pursued them, were all slain with the sword, and not one of them was left, right? So after they fled and was running into different areas, Israel came out in droves and cornered them in and boxed them in. And as they boxed them in, everyone took their sword and went and started slicing and dicing and killing them all, right? When we read these stories and we read about how these men were slain, and these men were slain with the sword, then you understand, like it tells you in the Old Testament, the Most High is a man of war, right? And his name is upon us. Right now, we're far removed from that vengeance, that courageous, that anger to go out there and just actually be killing and slicing and dicing, right? We read about it, but that spirit is not there yet. The Most High is going to put that spirit in us when the time serves itself. because we're not there. Even some of us who are in all these camps, oh, I hate they did the devil is I'm gonna do this. We're not fully there. The Most High says we're gonna fight according to his anger, according to his vengeance, not our own, right? Because sometimes we be partial with certain things. Like, that guy, well, he helped me out, last week, he helped me out. This guy over here. So, I might be a little lenient with him, but that guy over there, no, I'm gonna take him out. Nah, the Most High gonna change that spirit. However, the Lord wants us to be vengeful and take that, that's what spirit is going to be in us. And imagine seeing this when everybody coming out the city with swords and they got them boxed in the middle and they just going in and slicing and dicing and killing and blood is splattering and heads is rolling, right? You can't be like, oh my gosh, stop, no, this is bad. Nah, because if that didn't happen, imagine what they was going to do to you. Right? What they was going to do to you, right? Exactly. That's how I'm saying it. Like, that's how I'm not talking about the brothers saying that. I ain't talking about the brothers saying that, but you might have some brothers that might say that. You're right. I don't know. You might have some brothers that say that. Yeah. Yeah, you might have the alphabet community come out and be like that. Stop! Don't do that. You gotta have love for our brother. All this craziness, right? But the Most High gonna put the spirit in it, man. Like these men that came out to go and do this during that time, and if you envision it, and you say to yourself, that could I go and do that? To an extent, you could say, yeah, I'll fight for the nation, but ultimately, the Most High got to put the spirit on us to get into that mind state of how the Lord wants us to fulfill his will.
We could be partial. Let God help me out a little bit that one time. I'll put him in charge of some of the other enslaved folks over there. Go ahead, you take this whip over here, whip this back. And
right.
Be leaning on this person because they looked out at one time.
See, the problem with that is, sometimes the heathen will look you out because of guilt, right? Some of them realize, the atrocities that went down, and they'll try to, show favor, be a little bit lenient to you out of guilt. But now, even those who may do that, we may not know exactly what they did in the previous life. We don't know to what extent that they've caused harm upon us, that the Most High always said, listen, no, that guy got to go, right? You may have a guy who jabbed Yahushua in the side, who's sitting up in a certain office or a corporation, and he might say, you know what? We're going to, affirmative, we're going to hire this guy. And you saying like, yo, the guy was dope. He gave me an opportunity, right? Not knowing that the Most High puts the spirit on the enemies. Was that Judges 15:11? The Lord will put the spirit on them to show you favor. It's just not them always doing it out of their own accord. Jeremiah, was it? Yes, Jeremiah 15:11, right? The Lord does that. So we only surface sometimes. We just see what they do and say, come on now, you can't be all bad on the brother. Look what he did. The guy helped us out. But the Most High was to flash in your memory what he had been doing or what he had done. Then you be like, oh, hell, man, that don't even matter. That don't even count. That don't measure up. You got to give about 500,000 people some jobs for what you've done. You still got to pay. So we're not there yet. We still trying to groom ourselves to get to a point where we're at where the Most High wants us to be, right? And then we'll get the gifts of those spirits and counsel and might and things of that nature where the Lord wants us to use it for the right moment in time, all right? All right, let's read on. It says in verse 45, it says, then they pursued after them a day's, I read this, verse 47, Thwada. It says, afterwards they took the spoils and the prey and smote off Nicanor's head and his right hand, which he stretched out so proudly, and brought them away and hanged them up toward Jerusalem. So they cut off his neck, took a sword, or cut it off, and they hold it in his hand, and then they cut off his right arm because he was using that right arm to curse and say what he was going to do to the temple. So they wanted to use this now as a sign, as a token that anybody who wants to go and do these same things, this is what's going to happen to you. You can get your head chopped off, your arm cut off, because you are now using these things to speak blasphemy against the Most High. It says, and brought and hanged them up toward heaven. I think when you read it in 2 Maccabees, I think they cut out his tongue also. If I'm not mistaken, they cut out his tongue and then cut it in pieces and was feeding it to the birds or something like that, right? So imagine that, right? You got to be in a real warlike mind state to be mad as I don't know what. You're looking at this dead man's head. You say, you know what? Remember what he was talking about? Give me a knife. Somebody give me a knife, and then open that mouth and taking it and cutting out his tongue. You got to think about this stuff, man. Because when you're reading it, it just sounds you're just reading words, but you got to think of these men, these righteous men of the Lord, and what they cut this guy's head off, cut his arm off, and posted it up on the post so that people walking by could see it. And then they cut his tongue out and cut it in pieces. Cut it. They feeding it out to the birds and things. How you show me around and then there you go. Exactly. You're going to put some respect on the Most High's name. You ain't going to speak bad about the Lord and his people like that. Speak about his temple.
Yeah, like he was saying, but they will call that person barbaric.
Exactly. Savage. Exactly.
That's how they look at it.
Yep.
And then I would hear people say, I reread the Old Testament. Oh, there's too much killing, too much. How could a God doing so much killing? What kind of God is that?
Right.
So you hear people say a lot about when you read the stories.
Exactly. And that's, again, that goes back to Isaiah 8:20, to the law and to the testimony. You got to take the completeness of the Most High. You can't be one of the people who just want to have, and even when they did this, they still don't know the Bible. You got some people who just want to have Psalms and Proverbs because they want to not deal with all that other killing and everything. But even when you read it in the Psalms, the stuff is in there too, right? But you not understand what you're reading when you're reading these books? Do you not understand what the Lord and the prophets are saying? But they just want to, focus on peace and love, right? And brotherly kindness and everything else, but not deal with anything else, right? Not deal with the other history that led to those times. So they are following after Caesar Borgia. They're following after Christianity. They're following after that other Jesus to have that mentality. So just like what Manashah said, when you speak or read these things, what Bible you read? Not my God. I ain't never heard no God act like that. That's an evil God. Why would you serve a God like that, right? And then you realize and you say, well, I guess you really don't know the Most High. I guess you don't know Yahushua at all, because it's been this way throughout the ages up until now. Why do you think what's going on now is going on now, right? God controls all, right? The world is in his hand. His eye is on the earth. He got the angels out there. What, he sleep or they just doing this stuff when he not looking? What the heck is going on? Yeah, they're doing it behind his back.
I just want to read the scripture here in Jeremiah. You just mentioned about the spirit that put on us as far as for us to go in battle.
Come.
Jeremiah 51, verse 20 and 21.
Come. Battle axe. Battle axe.
Jeremiah 51, verse 20. Thou art my battle axe and weapon of war, for with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms, and with thee will I break in pieces the horses and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot and his rider.
Keep reading.
With thee also will I break in pieces men and women, and with thee will I break in pieces old and young, and with thee will I break in pieces the young man and the maid.
Man, so when you read it during the times of Joshua and them, that's what they did back then, right? The Lord, that's Jeremiah 51, 20 down to 22. The Most High had Joshua and the men go and kill old, young men, women, right? Even sometimes kill their animals, burn up the whole city, right? And you say, well, dag, that's a bit excessive, isn't it? Like, what did the little kid do? Right? What did he do? What did she do? Why you got to go and do that? Because the Most High said so, right? Question the Most High. If you don't like it, then you got to say to yourself, well, what kind of God am I serving? And that's where Israel becomes rebellious. They fall victim to now wanting to follow after these other gods because they have these other type narratives that cater to the people and not the people catering to the Most High, following his will. Yep.
But it's funny how the same nations go out and do the same thing when they go and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
They'll kill and destroy everything.
Yep. And don't regard nobody.
Don't regard nobody.
Exactly.
And we turn around and follow them. But when we read the Most High do it, oh, what kind of God is that?
Right. No, but you know what's interesting is I think to an extent, Esau in particular, they realize what it is and how they've gotten to where they are now, right? Like we about to be in so-called Independence Weekend, right? Independence Day, right? When you go into the history and you say, well, how did you gain your independence? You had to kill some people. You had to fight for it. People had to die, right? So now they're so far removed from the actual things happening that it's not right in their face, that they just now living, they're taking advantage of the spoils of victory, right? Now you can live comfortably and go and travel and do whatever you want without no opposition. But prior to that, you had to go and fight for it and people had to die. And now when you look at how to keep it, it's like so-called president said a couple months ago when this proxy war started, he said we have to defend democracy, right? We have to defend it, right? That means you ain't got to go take it. You got to defend what you've already established, meaning we got to aid those who need help so that we don't fall down the line, down the totem pole from where we are right now. So they got to send weapons. They got to send money to go and do what? Help them fight that war to stop their progression and to take it over their territories, right? So I see. So now here it is when you look at the hypocrisy in what has been established. It's like, well, dag, man, you can easily go bomb another country over in the Middle East and a whole building get taken out with innocent people, all for the sake of getting one man. One man. But a whole building got taken out. These people, they didn't give a damn about that one man, but you just took them out, right? So imagine what they going through. Imagine what they thinking. But when you over here, frying up your hot dogs and flying off the skyrockets and everything else, you ain't thinking about that, right? You don't care. You don't consider. That's what came out in our plight, Jacob's troubles here in America, where we've seen Esau and them come up and say, we don't understand your plight, nor do we have to, right? We always had to understand their plight. We're taught their history. We're taught their language. We had to know them. We had to cater up to them. They don't have to care about nobody else because they're at the top of the totem pole, right? So when certain things happen, they say, oh, we didn't realize that was going on. I didn't understand that. You didn't have to. So when you don't have to care about someone else, sure, their consequence, they're just casualties of war. It happens, defending our freedom. We're defending our democracy. And if it happens that has to happen, hey, so be it, right? We don't want to give up what we got, right? Who wants to give up these privileges? Who wants to give up this freedom, this liberty to say and do what you want? Esau's not going to do that, right?
It's almost like the celebration of independence is like the celebration of prophecy that was prophesied to Esau when he asked his father. But you don't have another prophecy, you don't have another blessing from me. And he said, yeah, you're going to break your brother's yoke and you're going to conquer with the sword. So it's almost like this celebration of Independence Day is the celebration of their breaking our yoke on them and conquering with the sword.
Good.
I think last week before we went out, I quoted what Hamana Shah said, we thought was on point. He said people like react, which we were saying earlier about I think I said something to the effect of imagine 100 years from now, we had the cookouts on 9/11, right? Talking about never forget.
Right.
Right? You kind of see people like kind of like looking at it, stopping. It's like they wanted to say something, but they knew they were trapped up. And I was like, I told them when you said that, I was like,
Done.
because you know, like you said, when it comes to them, everything stops when it comes to defending us.
Yep.
Or America.
Yep. All right, let's finish up. So this is First Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 48. It says, "For this cause the people rejoiced greatly, and they kept that day a day of great gladness. Moreover, they ordained to keep yearly this day, being the 13th of Adar." Right? This is where we keep what we call it the Day of Judas. Back in the day years ago, we used to call it Nicanor's Day, but we're not honoring Nicanor, we're honoring Judas. So it became the Day of Judas, right? It says, "Thus the land of Judah was in rest a little while." So after Nicanor got taken down and his forces, and we established that day to be commemorated every year on the 12th month within the lunar/solar calendar, on the 13th day, it is a day of remembrance and memorial for Judas Maccabees. All right. It's about, I'm going to take a break. It's about 1:25. We're going to come back. We're going to take a 30-minute break, stretch our legs, get a quick bite to eat, and we're going to come back and go into First Maccabees, the 8th chapter, right? And it's going to go into, switch gears and go into the Romans, right? We're going to go into the Romans and how they now fit into the storyline of what was going on during the times of the Greeks. All right, so again, about 1:55, we're going to come back and do the second half of the service. All right. Please check your text messages for the next link to come out to dial in. All right.